alumni event, Diversity in Technology and Mathematics, featuring Dr. Satyan Devados, Fletcher Jones Chair and Professor of Mathematics. My name is Megan O'Rourke, and I'm the Associate Director of Regional Programs for the Office of Alumni Relations at USD. I'm also a proud member of the class of 2015. I have the pleasure of working with our 23 domestic Torero clubs across the country, including the Bay Area Torero Club, who is co-hosting today's program with the College of Arts and Sciences. Although we are physically apart, our amazing club committees are hard at work, putting together and supporting virtual programming for our alumni to keep them engaged with and connected to the university, in addition to keeping them connected to one another. Special shout out to the Bay Area Torero Club members who are on this call. I see Phil Fong, and I know that Maya Mancuso will be joining us here in a second. While today's event is set in the Bay Area, its virtual setting allows Toreros from all over the country to join us for this important and informative conversation. Thank you to those who have joined us live and for those who will be watching at a later time. And speaking of watching at a later time, this event will be recorded and available on the USD Alumni Association's YouTube channel later this week. We will begin today's event with round robin introductions and small group networking for you to get to know one another and to meet Dean Norton and Dr. Devados. We will then bring you back for the presentation, Q&A, and college updates. Friendly reminder to keep your lines muted when you are not speaking. But because this is meant to be a highly interactive event, if you can go ahead and turn on your cameras, we would love to see your smiling faces. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Dean Norton.
I am going to introduce our speaker formally. I think you're going to want to hear more about him. Today's topic is diversity in mathematics. As you know, you signed up for that. Our guest speaker, you just met, Dr. Satyan Devados. Our dedicated team, and some of them are here tonight in the college, we aspire to lead cultural understanding that creates a better society. But we have a lot of work to do, and we know we have a lot of work to do. That's in part why we decided the theme of today's and our other alumni roadshow events to be diversity related, because we want to explore diversity across a variety of different topics and around the nation. And if you don't notice, we're matching up the topic related to diversity to the area. So when we were in DC, we did diversity in politics. New York, we did diversity in theater. Here, we picked you for diversity in mathematics, and we picked diversity in cinema and film for LA, and we've got more coming. So that's just kind of gives you an idea of what we're doing. But I hope you are looking forward to hearing about the significance, the influence, and the challenges in the world of math here tonight at the same level I am. Let me tell you about the speaker. Satyan Devados is the Fletcher Jones Chair and Professor in the Mathematics Department. Before arriving at USD in 2016, he was a professor of mathematics at Williams College, and he had been there since 2002. But he also had held visiting positions at Ohio State, at UC Berkeley, and the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute, Harvey Mudd, the Université of Nice, and at Stanford. So he's had quite a bit of experience and been in very unique places. He is the recipient of 2 National Teaching Awards from the Mathematical Association of America, and as he is also an inaugural fellow of the American Mathematical Society. He is definitely a strong proponent of the liberal arts, and he believes that ideas should be made incarnate for the physical matters. Humans care about how things look, taste, feel, and sound, and mathematics is part of this tapestry, dealing not just with the mind, but the body as well, and extending to our tangible world. These are the things that are important to him and to us at USD, and why we're so happy we have him. He will address the topic of diversity as it relates to mathematics. Over the past century, mathematics has deeply embraced abstract thinking, making it the foundation of scientific achievements. And with the meteoric rise of technology made prevalent by COVID, mathematicians have really been propelled to positions of great influence. All of this has come at a dangerous cost, with measurability replacing complexity and the mind replacing the body. We offer a possible way out, which is Good. Through the lens of diversity and equity, where mathematics can play a redeeming role in making us more human once again. So welcome to Professor Satyan Devados, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm just excited to hear what he's going to say next. He always has something unique.
Thanks, Noel. For the past few years, I know I'm relatively new to USD, but I've been working with Noel closely on some committee work. So it has just been a joy to get to know her. One of the reasons I came to USD is kind of her trust in some of the ideas that I had, and I'm moving from like knowing her to loving her, like how much she fights for the school. So I think it's fantastic. And most importantly, my friends, I just wanted to let you all know that this is not about me. I think that long introduction is sort of enough. Like we could just now talk. I mean, that just took like so long to honor me. That's really cool. But I want to make sure everything is on the table today. And what I mean by that is please ask me anything and everything. I want to speak for 5 minutes and then kind of stop talking and open it up for discussion and then speak for 5 more minutes and talking, because there's no point in waiting for like a 20-minute talk. Listen, everybody right now wants a beer and a pizza and just a chance to relax. So I know it's kind of hard to do this when you're staring at a screen all the day long. And when I say everything is on the table, I literally mean that. Like my marriage, I think it's an A. My wife thinks it's a B minus. Out of my 4 kids, I like my third one the best right now. My first one's sort of number 4 right now. So I mean, just ask me anything. It's all cool. And the reason I say that is the word diversity. I was just listening to Maya when she said something about women, like you were trying to encourage more women to be in the sciences and in technology. Like, what does that even mean, diversity? Like, do we mean gender? I mean, do we mean race? Do we mean diversity of the disciplines? Like we want more kinds of math? Do we want more, like we want social sciences and humanities to be in the game? It's a really loaded word. Some of the comments I've heard is this about critical race theory? Like, is this, is that kind of what it's getting into, that diversity has to do with this? Is it like left-wing propaganda? Like, what is the point? Hey, math is so pretty and pure. Why mess with it, with this diversity word? Like let diversity be in the humanities, or in the social sciences, or even in theology, but why math? And in full honesty, I'm a fool. Like, this is not my world. Like, I live in the world and I do mathematics and I've seen things because I'm old. But in terms of an expert in this world, I'm really an expert as a mathematician. So I want to be really careful that I don't speak. One of the things that really I find interestingly painful is that those who aren't in the humanities speak about topics that they're not qualified for. So many scientists today talk about issues like philosophy is dead and theology is over. Well, dude, how can you say that? You're saying a philosophical statement by saying philosophy is dead. And it's just like these crazy things that they're not equipped for. So I just want to be careful that I, as a mathematician, don't speak into the realm of those who've struggled and bled in the social sciences and the humanities to talk about issues of diversity in some arrogant way because I just have a math PhD. So I want to be really careful about that and how I start by saying that. And I also do think these big 3 words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, as you might know in academic life, or maybe if you're kind of, pushing the forefront of that in your own worlds, it's kind of everywhere. And I don't want it to mean everything, because then it means nothing. So I just want to let you know what I think of it. And since this is a really hard word, the best way I can do it is not by giving you a definition, but by sharing with you some things. So let me actually share with you about what I think about how diversity and math fit together. So I just want to speak for a few minutes, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if anybody kind of wants to say anything, Noel, you have ultimate power to interrupt me. Anybody else can, but I think the one thing I found out about USD more than any school I've ever been at is they're the kindest students in the universe. Like they're just so gentle and kind to me. And so I feel like none of you would interrupt me because you're so nice. So like, feel free to do so, but Noel should just be like, hey, could you just stop talking for a second? There's all these other questions that are coming, or, this other idea came to me. So let me just share with you just a few of these. I hope you can see this picture. Erica, is this okay? Can you? Okay, awesome, thanks. So first of all, let me just show you, when we're talking about diversity in math, like, what do I mean by math? So the classic notion that many people think today, and this definition is over 100 years old, right, comes from Bertrand Russell. He's a philosopher and a mathematician, and this is a framework from the 1900s that people think today. And here's his framing. He writes, remote from human passions, remote even, I love this thing, remote even from the pitiful facts of nature. Like, he's kind of knocking the sciences as he's talking about math. The generations have created an ordered cosmos, which is mathematics, where pure thought can dwell in its natural home, and where one, at least, of our nobler impulses can escape from the dreary exile of the actual world. I find this, I am almost 180 degrees to this definition. But yet this is the definition many people believe, that it's a Platonic thought. Like, math exists beyond us, right? It's out here. So why are you messing with issues of diversity, kind of the muck and the mud of real human life, when it's supposed to belong with the gods, right? It kind of lives in the cosmos up here. Let me tell you why I want to push against this. The reason I want to push against this is there's a framework. I grew up in India. I was born and raised in India. And this is the framework that I grew up with as a kid, which is that there's kind of a spectrum of all the disciplines in the world. Math is on one end, right? Like the glorious, perfect spectrum. And art is the spectrum that kind of like deals with those who are kind of literally working with your hands, right? You're getting paint on the walls. And the spectrum kind of goes from one side to the other one. And as you kind of move, most people think, this is unfortunate. Not only is it true in India and in the British system, but I noticed this in America as well, that as you move from the left to the right, you're getting smarter. I'm sitting in a plane, somebody finds out I'm a math professor, they go, oh my gosh, dude, you must be smart. They have no idea who I am, right? They don't know whether I've, got my PhD and haven't gotten a job for 30 years, or I've just won the Nobel. Nobody cares. Just the fact that I just said math. Oh, dude, you know calculus, differential equation. And they always kind of, either day one or two things. They kind of brag about how much they know, and most likely they talk about how much they failed. Forgive me, Father, for I've stopped at trig. Please absolve my sin, as algebra is the last thing I learned. There's always this notion of this painful thing associated to math. But if you say, you know what, I'm an economist, they say, oh, that's cool. I'm a historian. Good for you. I'm an art professor. Oh, well, that's cool, right? And there's this lull of where the brilliance is. There's this duality in the world today that on one side, if you have math and technology, those who deal in that world, and then the other side, those in the humanities and the arts, that math is this measurable, beautiful thing, and those who are in the humanities and the arts are kind of emotional creatures, right? And these are the smart ones, right? They've kind of made it. Oh, you're in the tech sector, you're in Silicon Valley. Oh, you're in the humanities. That's cool. And then, unfortunately, this is how we kind of push our own kids, right? Oh, I wish my daughter would do X, or I wish my son would do Y so they can get a job. I deeply want to push against this duality, because for us to have a conversation about diversity in math, what is really going on and what's complicated? Let me show you what I think is true. I think this spectrum is absolutely true, but it's not a spectrum about being smart. It's actually a spectrum about being measurable. I think there's really this hidden notion that's going on behind the scenes. And this hidden notion is how things are complicated. My friends, you see, I think math is pathetically easy in terms of the stuff it deals with. It takes the world and it abstracts it to so much simplicity that we could do really cool things with it, because we're dealing with simple Legos. But those in the biology world, they're dealing with issues of real life. They're not talking about a fish that's dead. They're talking about a moving, living organism. And those who deal with history talk about what the fish was doing 4 years ago. A far harder question, far more complicated. So you can't have quick measurable data. And those in the arts, and I think those in the arts are the frontiers of what's going on in our world today, because they are trying to embody things that don't even have words and definitions. And so, yeah, you cannot have measurable things. When we talk about the word diversity, the people in this entire thing who are the least equipped to deal with that word are the mathematicians, right? Because we are the ones who have nothing to do with the reality, most likely. But at the same time, we're in the world. We have this cool position in the world. And what is this position? Let me share with you in a second. I'm going to stop sharing and we could talk. Here's what I really think is going on. If you look at two things, on the left, here's a piece of a page from quantum mechanics, right? It's like a textbook from quantum mechanics. On the right, I don't know, maybe I can, does anybody know what this is?
No.
Maybe you know what this text is from? Bonus points. Come on, Maya, rock it out of the park. Patrick, you are leading the charge with, I think, 82 you said. Maybe you know. The right is my favorite book of all time. One could even say a poem.
Beowulf.
Yes, thank you, Erica. Beowulf.
I'm a Mitchellist.
I'm sorry?
I'm a medievalist, of course.
Good
I
for
knew
you. That's awesome. It's Beowulf, exactly. And so here's my question. Which is more complicated, the thing on the left or the thing on the right? In fact, you could even replace the thing on the left with like some code if you want, right? Like it's like, and you could ask the question like, what's more complicated? And if you actually look over here, well, gosh, like what the heck is this? And this is exponential function. This is Planck's constant. This is like a dot product, the square root plus and minus. You're getting nauseous over here. And on the right, if you look at this, look at these: shoulder, comfort, cold. Oh my gosh, that's like second grade. And yet I claim that you could spend your entire life trying to understand the page on the right and just not even make a dent in the beauty and the glory of Beowulf. And yet the left is actually doable because you're taking this complex idea and distilling it down into an equation. Listen, if anybody knows how to take care of my wife better based on an equation, please let me know, because it is so complicated that no equation can handle it. And yet we understand quantum mechanics because you have these equations for it. And same thing for a code. We could actually code and let it do things because it's not the hard stuff. Math and technology are on the easy end of the spectrum. So here's what I really think is going on. Math is measurable, and the humanities are complex. Math is clear, and the humanities are opaque. Math and tech are clean things, and those in the humanities and the arts deal with raw things. So I want to stop there and just like open it up for discussion and just talking. But before we kind of get into the issues of diversity, that's how I think of mathematics, that it actually deals with really simple things. The only catch that I want to close with is it holds the key to so much power in the world. Because right now, technology is fueling so many things. And if you say the word STEM, right? And even Noel was talking about artificial intelligence. That opens the door. If you talk about issues of humanities and what it means to be human, it's not as interesting nowadays. So although we deal with the simple things, we have power. And the fact that the humanities and the arts deal with the most complicated things, the power has been deprived from them. So I just want to, that's my framing. It could be wrong, but I just want to open it up to any thoughts.
And well, I think the first thought, and I would love to have Sandy Barsky ask his question, because it kind of ties all your thoughts together. And it actually ties into Maya's next comment as well. Sandy, did you want to ask that one?
Yes, my
Sorry.
questions. Okay, mute. I was addressing STEAM versus STEM. And one of the key reasons is that one of my friends retired as a commander in the Navy. He was very concerned about the Navy because all the education is in STEM. And he was trying to figure out how anybody will think their way out of a complex problem without the arts.
Yes.
So to get a diversity of thought, a different type of diversity, since you opened it up to many aspects, it would be to put the arts in, or as someone else said in here, the humanities in more general. Over.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, how do we bring those worlds together? I think so. In terms of the arts, in that particular viewpoint, I'm very opinionated. So please forgive me, because this is kind of me kind of preaching from my pulpit. But one of the things that has happened in the world when people talk about STEM and STEAM, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And the STEAM, you just put an art in it and it makes it STEAM. Sounds kind of cool. I can't stand it. And I'll tell you why. I'm not a fan of it at all, because what it really does is it converts an artist into a laborer. You basically say, listen, what really matters is my life. I have things to visualize and worry about. Can you go and build something for me? Can you kind of go and like help me visualize this thing? Because I know that's what really artists do. You guys are it's basically turning to what I do and say, if Noel comes to me, listen, could you balance my checkbook? I know you're like the Fletcher Jones math professor, but I'm really struggling with that thing. And I'd be like, Noel, I know, but there's Excel. There's like 1,000 things that can do it for you. But sure, I can help you, but I'm really not good at like actually the adding part of it, right? And that's really true. I'm not really good at adding. And to say that an artist is only gifted at visualization rather than thinking deeply about complicated ideas and trying to express it, that's what I worry about. Now, one could really put those two things together, Sandy, as you're saying, like what's the right way to do it? In fact, that's the last part of what I wanted to speak about today, is to how to really integrate those things together. And the short answer is it's going to be costly. And what I mean by that is it's going to be through lots of conversation, through breaking bread together, to having meals together. And one of my last slides is literally a quote from Pope Francis and Father and Angel Rodriguez talking about farming. Like, I think it's a slow process of listening to those in the humanities and the arts and incorporating it in. I think anytime you have a quick fix to things, we're again thinking life is not as complicated as we think it is, and we move into the realm of technology. I love the Humanities Center. It's actually like right below, I mean, actually right above my office in that corner in Sarah Hall in Saints and Sarah. And I love the fact that it's set up for just hanging out. Like, you could just go there, sofas to sit, and it's not the short fix of getting stuff done. The first thing you see in the Humanities Center is a gallery, right? You kind of like walk around and kind of slows you down when you come in here. So it's a long process that's needed.
Anybody else? Because I can ask a question. And it might lead you into another part of your talk. I'm not sure because we didn't pre-prepare for this, but yeah. You're talking about the complexity of art and maybe not the complexity of math. Thank you for convincing me of that. But we're here to talk about diversity. And so what does diversity have to do with math?
Yeah, I think to me, when I think of the word diversity, I think it has to do with access. Because if you have the fact that math has so much power, then my question is who gets to play the game? Mm-hmm. And if we say that, well, anybody can come to the table if you want to, well, that's kind of an unfair setup if the table is like 30 feet high, right? It's like, well, if you're 29 feet, you might, but if you're 31 feet and up, you can play nicely at the table. Well, that actually, as we know, the world's kind of not tilted because of certainly from Catholic intellectual tradition, it's clear that the world is broken, right? Things aren't the way it is. And there are those who haves and have-nots. I grew up in India. It might seem like a poor country. In many ways, it's brutally poor. On the other hand, I'm like, both my parents are academics. They're both college professors. I'm super privileged of having that as a background. But when we came to America, we had no money. So there's this funny tug of like, am I a privileged kid or not? And one of the things I really struggle with is how do you allow everybody to play the game of mathematics and STEM to give a privilege? And my answer, I think, going back to Maya's comment about having women join this thing and having those of different races, and I agree, I think racial diversity, ethnic diversity, right? Gender, these are all huge things. And my lens has not been wired to think based on race or gender, but my lens has been wired to think about bodies. That's what I really have been struggling with. So I just want to push a little bit, especially to Emma. I remember you were talking about as a teacher, right? You kind of framed that way. Do you remember in first grade and second grade, especially if you did Montessori or, any kind of that framework, there are always these toys around, there's blocks and blocks of toys that you get to play. I'm sorry?
They're called manipulative.
Thank you. Right? Those
and
are
technical. Right there, Satya.
Yeah. Well, this is actually my math research with my students, right? It's amazing. So it's super cool. But yeah, exactly. Thank you, Noah. You just kind of pick this up, and then as a kid, you kind of learn manipulative, as Emma's saying, to touch and hold these things. And what happens is by the time you're in fourth grade, the moment you pick up one of those, you're kind of shunned. You're like, oh, that's kid stuff, right? You've kind of grown. Now you're actually thinking about a base times height times, you're thinking about volume equations, right? Or area equations and perimeters. And then you get to quadratic formulas and Pythagorean theorems. And gosh, you don't even know what the heck you're doing the Pythagorean theorem for. It might be just a simple block, but you've kind of forgotten. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do to level the playing field is to allow our bodies to be as valuable as our minds. That has been my biggest struggle in the past 15 years, is what does it mean to do that? And the reason I want to say that is so many people learn so differently. I even read really quickly in the chat, it says my husband and I would disagree as what is more complex or not complex. But that is totally true. For some people, Beowulf might be a natural, joyous thing. For some people, the physics, quantum mechanics thing might be the way we're wired. And what I'm trying to do is, it is such a complicated field for me to say, yeah, I can really handle issues of racial diversity, and let me tell you what it is. That's arrogant for me, right? I would have loved to have given my life to do that, and then I could have a little platform to speak to you on. But I sort of have given my life to think about what it means to use the body, and this is why I think UST was attractive to me and is such a good fit for me, because UST being a Catholic school has such a deep value for embodiment. You see the Immaculata, and it's not as a Protestant you go, I am a Protestant, but you can't just be well, just pray to God anywhere. Well, that's true, but the Immaculata is and you could also do it here. It's amazing when you walk in there and your body is impacted.
we've got some good questions here.
Cool. Yeah, keep
Okay.
going. I don't mind just doing this and we could step it up. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let me ask these two, and then
Please,
we'll pause
please,
and see
yeah.
if you want to get back onto your track.
Mhm.
This is from Sandy Barsky as well. And Sandy, do you want to ask it? Or yeah.
Sorry, why don't you go ahead, because I just had
Okay.
to come off mute, and then I'd have to call up the chat to read it off.
Oh, I
So-
see it. I think I see your question, Sandy. Let me read it for you.
Yeah.
Is this what you're saying? Did people from different cultural backgrounds approach mathematics differently? Does the diversity open up progress in math research? That is an amazing question that I am personally struggling with our department right now. I mean, literally, I have been asking not just our department, but faculty from around the nation to say, if you grew up in Iran, if you grew up in Persia, do you actually view things differently than if you grew up as a kid in India? Now, the hard part to answer that directly, I don't think it's been quantifiably studied. And the reason is technology has kind of leveled the connection so far that when you read a research paper in India, that paper might be coming from Israel, might be coming from South Africa. And so it's not that kind of indigenously it's growing in certain places. Certainly it's been true over the years. Right, Sandy? Like India has kind of thought in a certain way that's been very different than the way Persian and Arabic thought has been. Then certainly in the French, I could tell you, like French abstract mathematics is so abstract they don't even care. They're like floating in the crowd. They think Bertrand Russell is too concrete, right? Like that's the French thought. So I could tell you that over the years it's been like that, but today in the 21st century, I don't know, and I would love that question to be answered. But let me actually, Emma, please jump in.
When we think about kids across the world,
yes,
when they grow up, and I think of my own children, like watching them, they instinctively group things and count things, and they're counting and grouping as we do in mathematics before they're reading.
Yes,
they start that practice of mathematics so young,
yes,
everywhere, and are pretty much equal in those faculties before they get to school.
yes,
and then something happens when they get to school. And that's where things change within mathematics, and it somehow kills this ability to do some of those things somehow. And I mean, that was my experience. I at USC as a math major, and as a teaching, I was in the School of Ed as well. So we had the math for teachers class.
Yes, I totally know those things. 300, 305. Yep. Mm-hmm.
There was an elementary school one, and I remember that the students in that class struggled so much with that thinking. And so how are we changing the teaching of teachers?
Yes.
So that they foster those initial pieces that we are innate in so many kids.
Yes.
And not killing it so that it doesn't matter what our background is, because it doesn't matter. We group things. It's a natural ability.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, what I'm going to do, maybe Noel, I'm going to take the lead and like show a few slides, and then we'll kind of like close it up and open it up for the last bit of questions. Does that sound okay, Megan? Does that sound reasonable to you?
That's what you wanted to do, was to talk, chat, talk. Yeah. So now we're on the talk part.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure this last part actually answers Emma's comment and Sandy's comment, because what Sandy asked in that question was really interesting. He says, listen to his words, does the diversity open up progress in mathematics research? Right? His last word is kind of important. But Emma has been talking about mathematics as teaching, right? She's saying this is what it means to teach high school teachers and teach elementary school teachers. There's this big pull between, am I talking about research or teaching? I am, in one sense, a diehard math researcher. It gives me a rush to do math research. But at the same time, my job is to teach and to communicate and bring my students along. So when we talk about the issues of diversity, listen, no matter where we fall in the notion of diversity as the place you grew up from and how it impacts your research, it is absolutely clear that the person teaching you is going to impact how you learn. That study has been done, right? That's not a controversial issue, right? If somebody looks like me and somebody has the same experience as I do, being an immigrant, especially when I have students from overseas, it is so easy for me to connect to them immediately, right? Because they could just be like, oh, so you lived in an apartment with barely any food. And you guys found McDonald's to be a high in your week-long thing because you could finally afford a burger. That's what we did too. My parents are immigrants, or I just, came from Iran, or I just came from... So that connection so fast that all of a sudden that human connection of what it means to be there allows me to teach better. just because of the fact I'm another human. And this is what the Catholic intellectual tradition tells us, that one human can connect to another one just at a human level, which means they can listen a little closer, which means they can lean in and understand the struggles they're going through, especially through things like COVID. So I think when it comes to teaching, issues of diversity are absolutely, in the biggest letter D of diversity, are absolutely on the table. Inclusion, access, they're all there. But when it comes to research, is something that Sandy brought up. And that's something I really don't know, my friend, just yet. So let me close up with just a few slides, and I want to show you, to answer Emma's question a little bit, which is how are we teaching teachers today at USD, and also at the same time trying to see how we're going to train researchers at USD. Those are the questions that matter to me the most. So let me just share with you the slide, and let me jump ahead to the right spot that I want. Let me just show you this one picture, right? I think you guys might enjoy this thing. Cool. Can you see this kind of funny,
yes,
funny linkage, right? So it's an unsolved problem actually in math, not in math, but just in engineering. Can you create a linkage that actually allows you to take a circular motion? Do you guys see kind of this kind of circular motion and to make it into a linear motion? Is that possible? So for example, if I turn this wheel, I can turn this thing, this red thing on the circle. And if I do that, this thing becomes a line. Nobody knew how to do this for 150 years. And this French, not even a mathematician, he was an amateur engineer. He came up with this technique. And listen, do you guys see how many rods and joints this thing has? It has like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has 7 bars. That's it. No, none of the greatest minds could figure out how to do this thing. And this French amateur engineer came up with this thing. It was built, this is actually built in my office. It's a plexiglass so you can see this thing, but Lord Kelvin, do you guys know like the Kelvin temperature scale? Lord Kelvin built this thing out of wood and he took it with him to a conference. Sorry, not Lord Kelvin, J.J. Sylvester, a mathematician. He built it out of wood and he took it to a conference where Lord Kelvin was sitting there. And he gave it to Lord Kelvin, who was, by the way, one of the greatest scientists at that time. And here's what J.J. Sylvester writes. Lord Kelvin nursed this object as if it had been his own child. And when a motion was made to relieve him of it, he replied, "No, I have not had nearly enough of it. It is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life." It's just this model, right? Like it's this physical thing. This goes back to this manipulatables, right? Like these tangible things that Emma was talking about. It was just so amazing to Lord Kelvin to actually be able to hold theory into a physical concrete structure that it blew him away. I want to show you a couple of pictures. Like here's one picture. Did you know that we are making more vinyls now than in the history of the world? I find that really weird because I find that, well, maybe not as much, but like the record sales has been ridiculously amazing. And the reason I find that weird is because you have lossless music, right? If now's the time when you'd assume like vinyls would not be popular. And yet vinyls are so popular because people want to touch music. They want to actually hold things in their hands rather than have things on the clouds. This is why we pay like $300 for a cup of coffee, because here's the best way I can think about technology. It used to be a 3-dimensional world where you could actually move in time and space. And because of the Industrial Revolution, it became a 2-dimensional world. You move along a factory belt. And then it became a 1-dimensional world. And now, our world is 0 dimensions. We literally sit in front of the typewriter and we don't move. And so our bodies are craving for these things. So one thing that we wanted to do is to say, how can we do this with mathematics? Here's what Heidegger writes about the typewriter. He hated even the typewriter. I mean, I'm not even talking about cell phones. And he says, typewriters tears writing away from the essential realm of the hand. Mechanical writing deprives the hand of its rank and the realm of the written word and degrades the words to a means of communication. He says before, like if your friend is talking to you, you can actually see that cursive words, the way your grandmother would write it. And now it's just those clunky, text words. And this is the last picture I want to leave us with in terms of saying all of this.